You hear that sound, and you're instantly transported, right? But the story of the arcade is way bigger and a whole lot older than just pixels and joysticks. So let's really dig into how it all got started.
Okay, so when I say arcade game, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, I'm guessing it's got to be something like Pac-Man, maybe Street Fighter, right? You think of those dark rooms, the glow of the neon, all those video screens. And yeah, that's totally a huge part of the story. But it's not the beginning, not by a long shot.
To really get the full picture, we've got to jump in a time machine. We're going way back, past the 8-bit era, past the moon landing, all the way back to a time of gears, springs, and just pure, brilliant mechanical engineering.
So what is an arcade game really? When you strip it all down, it's pretty simple. It's a machine you pop a coin into for some entertainment. But there's a key phrase in that definition: game of skill. And you're going to want to remember that one because it becomes like the most important thing later on. The whole industry was basically built on and had to fight for that very idea.
All right, let's kick things off right at the start. Long before we had anything that looked like a modern arcade, you had traveling carnivals and seaside boardwalks. And they were just filled with these ancestors of the games we play today.
So the whole thing really gets going back in the 19th century, with those super simple games you'd find at a carnival. You know, knock down the pins, that sort of thing. Then some genius has this light bulb moment. What if we took that idea and merged it with these newfangled coin-op vending machines? And boom, you get the penny arcades in the early 1900s. But forget video games. We're talking about things like automated fortune tellers and those test-your-strength machines. Fast forward to the 1930s, right in the middle of the Great Depression, and you see games like Skee-Ball pop up. They were a cheap way to have a little fun, which, was something people desperately needed back then.
Okay, so now we get to what I think is a super underrated part of the story, the electromechanical age. This is a total game changer, literally. It's when electricity jumps into the mix, and it sparked a golden age of gaming all on its own, and we're still years away from seeing a single pixel on a screen.
So what's the difference, right? Well, think of a purely mechanical game as being powered by just gears and gravity. It's all physical. But these electromechanical games, or EM games for short, they were a whole new beast. They were a hybrid. They still had the mechanical parts, but now they had electrical components too. Lights, buzzers, switches, motors. It meant you could create experiences that were way more interactive and exciting than anything people had ever seen before.
And I'm telling you, the amount of innovation packed into this era is just mind-blowing. Look at this stuff. They were simulating vehicle combat, they had light gun shooters. Yeah, that idea is from way back then. They even had these pseudo 3D first-person racing games. And get this, the joystick with a fire button? That was an EMI invention. All of these things we think of as classic video game ideas actually got their start right here, in the 60s, using clever tricks with physical models, lights, and mirrors.
And here's a little piece of trivia that changed everything. That submarine game, Periscope, from 1966, it was so huge, so much bigger and more impressive than anything else out there that it was the very first game to charge a quarter, 25 cents. And just like that, it set the price for arcade games for like the next 20+ years, all from one game.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing. While all this cool EM stuff was happening, another giant of the arcade world, pinball, was in a fight for its life. And this wasn't just a small scuffle. This was a battle that would end up defining the entire industry.
No, seriously, this is what people in charge were saying about pinball. They called it a tool of the devil. Why? Well, because the earliest pinball machines didn't have any flippers. You'd just plunge the ball and hope for the best. So they were legally considered games of chance, basically the same thing as a slot machine. And this kicked off a huge moral panic, with people convinced that pinball was a form of gambling that was going to corrupt an entire generation of kids.
I mean, what a saga. It's an incredible comeback story. First, the ruling comes down, pinball is a game of chance. Then come the bans. We're talking major cities like New York City, which outlawed pinball in 1942, and that ban lasted for decades. The first big turning point comes in 1947, with the invention of the flipper. This was huge, because for the first time, the player had real control. But the real movie moment happens in 1976. A journalist named Roger Sharp is testifying in front of the New York City Council, trying to get the ban overturned. He steps up to a machine, pulls a Babe Ruth, and literally calls his shot. He tells him exactly what he's going to do, plunges the ball, and then, bam, nails it. He proved right then and there that pinball was a game of skill, and with that one shot, the ban was overturned.
So that legendary shot by Roger Sharpe didn't just save pinball. It basically cemented that all-important game of skill idea that the entire arcade industry needed to survive. And you know what? It couldn't have come at a better time, because it set the stage perfectly for the next massive revolution, the video game.
Yeah, those EM games had done an amazing job of simulating stuff for years, but when Atari's Pong hit the scene in 1972, well, that was the real deal. It was so simple, just 2 paddles and a ball, but it was completely electronic and ridiculously addictive. It wasn't just a hit, it basically kicked off a digital gold rush.
And that gold rush led straight into the golden age that everybody knows and loves. We're talking about Taito's Space Invaders in '78, a game so popular it literally caused a coin shortage in Japan. Think about that. Then, of course, you get Namco's Pac-Man, which was an absolute global phenomenon, and then Nintendo's Donkey Kong. These weren't just popular games anymore. They were becoming a massive part of pop culture.
But you know how it goes. The party couldn't last forever. By 1983, the market was just flooded with too many games, a lot of them not very good, and even more importantly, you had powerful home consoles like the Atari 2600 starting to bring a pretty decent arcade experience right into your living room. All of a sudden, the arcade had some real competition on its hands for the very first time.
And to their credit, the arcades fought back hard. They had a huge resurgence in the early 90s, thanks mostly to one-on-one fighting games. And for a long time, they were still the top dog. In fact, arcades were the biggest piece of the video game pie all the way up until 1996. But then, the Sony PlayStation happened. By 1998, with these incredibly powerful consoles in people's homes, the home market officially became bigger than the arcade market. And that was it. That was the moment everything changed for good.
So is that the end of the story? Is the arcade just a museum piece now? Well, no, not at all. Its legacy, its impact on gaming and on culture as a whole is absolutely massive. And it's still evolving, still finding its place, even today.
So let's recap, right? The arcade is so much more than just a place to play Space Invaders. Its roots go all the way back to 19th century carnival games. The whole electromechanical era invented genres that we are still playing today. That whole legal drama over pinball, it literally defined the game of skill concept for the entire industry. For decades, if you wanted to see the absolute cutting edge of gaming tech, you had to go to an arcade. And the way it survives today is by doubling down on what it does best, offering these big, specialized experiences. Think of those wild Japanese rhythm games or full-blown VR setups that you just can't replicate at home.
And that really leaves us with the big question for today, doesn't it? In a world where we have entertainment literally on demand, unbelievably realistic games on our TVs, on our phones, everywhere, what is the future of a physical place you have to go to put a coin in a machine? The arcade has had to reinvent itself over and over and over again, from gears to flippers to pixels. So you have to wonder, what's the next transformation going to be?